Hi everyone. So today we're talking about solving equations that involve absolute value. So kind of a throwback to what we talked about with absolute value before. The first thing on here is the definition of absolute value, which we've actually already talked about. Okay, absolute value is always a number's distance from zero. But what I want to focus on today is what this kind of expression means. That if you have the absolute value of something that's unknown, what does that really mean? Well, in this case, the way this is written, this is saying that x is 5 spaces from 0. That's what it means when I say that the absolute value of x is 5. Okay, 5 spaces from 0. And what that's really saying then is x could be on either side of the 0. So we could have, if this is 0, we could have x be here, or we could have x be 5 spaces this way. So x could be 5 or negative 5. And this is going to be a big important piece of what we're doing today. What we're doing today is not difficult as long as you remember this important piece, that every one of these equations is going to have 2 solutions. If it's not a no solution problem, we'll talk about those too. So like when I look at this first example, absolute value of x minus 6 equals 3. That means that whatever is inside these brackets, this x minus 6, is 3 spaces from 0. So x minus 6 could be equal to positive 3, or x minus 6 could be equal to negative 3. Okay? Because we know like what that circle represents is either a positive 3 or a negative 3, because both of those things have an absolute value of 3. Now I have to solve those two things separately. It's easy to solve. I just add 6 to the other side, so I get x equals 9. But some people like to solve just that one and then kind of slap a plus or minus in front of their answer there. That's not where the plus or minus comes in. The plus or minus comes in by setting up these two equations, but then they have to solve separately. So like on this one, when I add 6 to the other side, I don't get 9. I get, let's see, negative 3 plus 6 would be positive 3. And then these are my two answers, and I do have to have both of those for this to be considered to be correct. Okay? And if you plug that back in up here, let's see, 9 minus 6 is 3, and the absolute value of 3 is 3. Or if I were to plug in a 3, 3 minus 6 is negative 3, and then the absolute value of negative 3 is still just 3. Okay, so let's look at the next one. 2x minus 1 equals 4, so I can start by breaking this up into 2x minus 1 equals 4, or 2x minus 1 equals negative 4. And then again, I'm going to solve those separately. So I'm going to add 1. This is just two-step equation solving. So 2x equals 5. And then divide by 2, and I get x equal to 5 halves. Okay, for one of my solutions. Or if I add 1 here, I don't get 5 this time. I get negative 3. So I have 2x equals negative 3. Divide by 2, and I end up with x equals negative 3 halves as my other possible solution. Okay. So now let's look at this next one, because there's something a little weird here. Do you remember back here in the definition, and maybe I should have written this in, absolute value is a number's distance from 0, and distance is always positive. Okay, when we're measuring distance, we're always measuring in positive units. So if you look at this problem, absolute value of 4x equals negative 6, there's a problem here, because I can't have the absolute value equal a negative number. Okay? Mom. So as soon as you have this situation where you have absolute value equal a negative number, that's going to be a no solution situation. Now, people get confused by that compared to like this. Because here you have it equal to a negative, but that's after you already ditched the absolute value and after you already split into two different equations. Okay? The problem comes in anytime you have absolute value of anything, doesn't matter what's inside there, equal to a negative number. This right here, this setup, is when you run into a no solution type situation. Okay? And I know that probably as a notation doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but really what I'm saying is anytime you have absolute value of something equal to a negative, that's going to be no solution. Okay? Okay, so now if we look at number 4 here, with this one, before I can do any sort of splitting, any sort of equation solving, I need to get these absolute value brackets by themselves. And I can't combine the 5 and the 2 because the 5 is locked away inside the brackets and the 2 isn't. But what I can do is move the 2 to the other side. And I want to do that first before I do any sort of splitting. So absolute value of negative 3x plus 5 equals 8. And now that I'm down to the point where I just have absolute value and it's equal to a number, first of all, this is where I would check to see if it's a no solution. This is positive, so I'm still okay. And so this is where I would now split and say negative 3x plus 5 equals 8 and negative 3x plus 5 equals negative 8. And then again, I do have to solve those separately. So subtract 5 from either side. I'm going to end up with negative 3x equals 3. Divide by negative 3 and I get x equals negative 1. By the way, it's also not a problem if your answer comes out negative. The only negative that will cause a problem is if it's equal to a negative while it's still in the absolute value brackets. That's the only time we're going to have a problem here. Okay, so here's one answer. And then for my other one, subtract 5 from the other side. So negative 3x equals negative 13. Divide by negative 3. My two negatives are going to drop off there. And I'm going to end up with x equals 13 thirds. Okay. And so for this last one, again, you have to get rid of anything that's outside of the brackets before you do your splitting. So I'm going to subtract 7 and subtract 7. Now, I want you to fight the urge to distribute here, okay? Because you really can't distribute inside absolute value brackets, all right? If it's on the outside of the brackets, you need to get rid of it, but you can't distribute it. You can't put it on the inside. So I can get rid of this by dividing by negative 5. Divide by negative 5. And I end up with absolute value of x minus 4 equals negative 3. Okay? And then right there, there's that scenario that we look out for, right? We've got absolute value equal to a negative number. So again, that's going to be no solution. Okay? So that's really all there is to the lesson today. It's just watching out for some of these trickier situations here. Remember, this is the only setup that's going to cause a problem. Absolute value equals a negative number. Okay? Your homework for tonight is in your homework packet. If for some reason you didn't get a homework packet yesterday, please stop down and grab one. It's just the front page, and I believe it just says absolute value equations or solving absolute value, something along those lines. But it's the very front page in your homework packet. Okay? All right, thanks for your time.